John Carter was a quiet man, a cowboy who had spent many years living alone on the edge of the desert. He liked the solitude, the open spaces, and the feeling of freedom that came with being far from the bustling towns. His life was simple: ride out to tend to the cattle, fix fences, and spend his evenings alone staring at the stars. He didn't mind the silence, but one day, as he was riding back from a creek where he had gone to refill his canteen, everything changed. John was on his horse heading back to his ranch when he spotted something strange near a rock. At first, he thought it was just another animal lying in the dust, but as he got closer, he realized it was a woman. She was lying on the ground, her body bruised and bloodied. The woman had dark, long hair and her clothes were torn. She was barely conscious, her chest rising and falling slowly, as if each breath was a struggle. John's heart skipped a beat. He had seen his share of trouble in the wild, but this was something different. The woman was clearly in pain, and her condition was worse than anything he had seen before. He dismounted from his horse and knelt beside her. His instincts told him to help her no matter who she was. He gently touched her shoulder, trying to wake her, but she didn't respond. He glanced around, but there was no sign of anyone else nearby. It looked like she had been left behind. John's mind raced. He knew he couldn't just leave her there. Despite the fact that she looked like she might be part of an Apache tribe, a group that many settlers feared, he couldn't bring himself to turn away. "Hey there, miss," he said softly, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. "You're going to be all right." He quickly reached for his canteen and poured some water into his hand. Gently, he lifted her head and offered her a drink. Her lips were dry and cracked, but she managed to sip the water, her eyes flickering open for just a moment. She didn't say anything, but there was a weak nod of appreciation in her gaze. John wasn't sure what to do next. He didn't know much about treating wounds, but he did know that he had to stop the bleeding. He carefully examined her, noticing that she had been shot in the arm. It was a clean wound, but it had clearly been left untreated for far too long. The sight of the blood made his stomach turn, but he pushed the feeling aside. He needed to focus. He tore off a piece of his shirt and used it to bind the wound, trying his best to stop the bleeding. As he worked, the woman's eyes fluttered open again, and this time she spoke. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. John froze. He had been expecting her to speak in the language of her people, but instead she spoke English, though her accent was thick. He gave her a reassuring smile, though inside he was still unsure of what he had gotten himself into. "Don't worry about it," he said softly. "I'm just trying to help." The woman's eyes met his, and for a moment there was a strange silence between them. John couldn't tell if she was looking at him with gratitude or suspicion, but he didn't care. He had to get her to safety. "You're Apache, aren't you?" John asked carefully, though he knew the answer already. She nodded slightly, her face tightening with pain. "I am Tala," she said, her voice shaking. "I am the daughter of the chief." John's heart skipped again. The Apache tribe was known for their fierce warriors, and though he didn't believe all the stories he had heard about them, he knew enough to understand that helping a member of their tribe could be dangerous. But looking down at the woman in front of him, he couldn't bring himself to leave her. She had already been through so much. Tala winced as she shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position. "The others, they left me," she whispered, almost as if she were ashamed of it. "I was too weak, too slow." John looked at her with sympathy. He couldn't imagine the pain she must have been in, not just from her wounds, but from the realization that her people had abandoned her. He didn't know much about Apache customs, but he knew that loyalty was everything to them. The idea that her own tribe had left her behind made his heart ache. "You're safe now," John said quietly as he gently helped her sit up. "I'll take care of you." For the next few hours, John kept watch over her, making sure she was comfortable and offering her whatever little food he had. He made a small fire to keep the night chill away, though Tala was still too weak to eat much. Every now and then she would drift in and out of sleep, but when she was awake, her eyes would linger on him as if trying to understand him. As the hours passed, John couldn't help but wonder about her story. Why had she been out here alone? What had happened to her people? He knew there was much he didn't understand, but for now, all he could do was help her heal. He had never been one for getting involved in tribal disputes or politics, but Tala's vulnerability made him want to protect her. When the morning light began to creep over the horizon, Tala's condition seemed a little better. Her breathing was steadier, and though she still looked pale, there was a glimmer of life in her eyes. She smiled faintly at John. "Thank you," she said again, this time more clearly. "You have saved me." John nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "I just did what I could." But just as he was about to turn and make a plan to take her somewhere safer, Tala's expression changed. Her eyes grew serious and she slowly shifted to sit up straighter. There was a weight to her words when she finally spoke again. "Tribal law," she said quietly, "says that when someone saves my life, they become my husband." John blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. He had been expecting a thank you, or perhaps a request for help getting back to her tribe, but this? He didn't know what to make of it. "You what?" he asked, his voice catching in surprise. Tala's gaze never wavered. "It is the law. You saved me. You are now my husband." John stood there, stunned. He didn't know what to say. Was this some sort of joke? A misunderstanding? He had never heard of anything like this before. But the seriousness in Tala's eyes told him that she wasn't playing games. This was something real, something that, for reasons he didn't fully understand, was now part of his life. He took a deep breath, trying to wrap his mind around what she was saying. A husband? To an Apache woman? It was a strange thought and one he didn't know how to handle. But standing there looking at Tala, so fragile yet so proud, he knew that things would never be the same again. For better or worse, his life had just taken a turn he could never have imagined. As the days passed, John found himself staying longer than he had intended with Tala. He had promised to help her, but he hadn't expected that helping her would lead him to an entirely new world. A world where the rules were different, where the customs were unfamiliar, and where he felt like a stranger in his own skin. After her wounds healed a little, Tala insisted on taking him to her tribe. She told him that her people would need to know about the law that now tied them together. John felt uneasy, but he agreed, not knowing what else to do. He had already crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. They set out for the nearby Apache camp, which wasn't far, but the journey was filled with tension. John could feel the weight of Tala's words on his shoulders. Her husband. He couldn't stop thinking about it. Tala wasn't just anyone in the tribe. She was the daughter of the tribal chief, a figure of authority and respect. John had heard stories about the Apache, their fierce warriors, and their deep ties to the land. He didn't know what kind of reception he would receive. Would they see him as an outsider, a trespasser, or would they accept him as the law required? When they arrived at the camp, Tala was greeted warmly by the other members of the tribe. They were wary of John at first, their eyes studying him with suspicion, but Tala explained who he was and why he was there. To John's surprise, they didn't chase him off. Instead, they allowed him to stay, though he could tell they weren't fully convinced. Days turned into weeks, and John tried to settle into this new life, though it wasn't easy. At first, he stayed in the background, observing, learning how the tribe lived, how they hunted, and how they cared for one another. Tala's father, Chief Redhawk, was a stern man with wise eyes, and he watched John carefully, though he didn't say much. John respected him, but he also knew that in a place like this, respect was earned, not freely given. The tribe had its own way of doing things. There was a rhythm to their life, a connection to the land and to each other. John found himself helping with tasks that were completely new to him. He learned to use a bow and arrow, though he wasn't very good at it. He helped build shelters, chopped wood, and helped the women with chores. At night, the tribe gathered around a fire to tell stories. John listened, trying to understand their ways. It wasn't always easy, but he was determined to fit in, to make himself useful. Throughout all of this, Tala never left his side. She would often help him with his tasks, offering advice or simply watching him work. She had a quiet strength that John admired, and he began to see her not just as someone bound by law to him, but as someone he could grow to care for. But still, the thought of the tribal law that had bound them together lingered in his mind. John didn't fully understand what it meant. Was it just a law of survival, or was it something deeper? Did Tala feel the same way about him, or was she simply fulfilling a custom? The question weighed on him. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, John and Tala were sitting by the fire. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, and the air was cool, a soft breeze stirring the dust around them. Tala looked at John, her face illuminated by the firelight, and her eyes were serious. "John," she said, her voice soft yet firm, "the tribe has accepted you. They see you as my husband, and they honor that. But you must understand that the law isn't just a formality. It is a bond of life and death. John looked at her, unsure of what she meant. What do you mean by that? Tala's gaze never wavered. In our tribe, a husband is a protector, not just in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense as well. The law that binds us goes beyond the act of saving my life. It means we are tied together in a way that cannot be undone. If anything were to happen to me, you would be responsible for what happens next. My family, my people, my spirit. It is not something I can take lightly. John felt a chill run through him. He had never thought about it that way. The idea of responsibility, of being bound to another person in such a profound way, was overwhelming. But as he looked at Tala, something inside him shifted. He realized that despite the strangeness of it all, despite his confusion and fear, he felt a deep sense of duty to her. I didn't know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know that's what it meant. Tala nodded, her expression softening. You don't have to understand it all right now. But you must understand that this bond is not just between us. It is between you and my people, and it is sacred. John took a deep breath. He had come to the Apache tribe looking for peace, for an escape from his own life, but now he realized his life had changed in ways he hadn't imagined. He wasn't just a cowboy anymore. He was a husband, a protector, bound by a law that was centuries old. Over the next few weeks, John's life continued to intertwine with the Apache way of life. He helped the tribe during a small skirmish with a rival group of settlers, proving his loyalty and gaining some respect. He learned their customs more deeply, understanding the importance of family, of respect, and of the land. He and Tala became more than just a husband and wife by law. They began to truly care for each other. There were no grand gestures or declarations of love, but there was a growing connection between them, built on shared experience and mutual respect. One evening, after a long day of work, John and Tala sat under the stars, the quiet of the desert surrounding them. For the first time since he had arrived, John felt at peace. He wasn't just a man passing through anymore. He was part of something bigger, part of a family, part of a tribe, and in his heart he knew that no matter what the future held, he had found a place where he truly belonged. As Tala leaned her head on his shoulder, John realized that the bond they shared wasn't just one of law. It was one of life, and that was a bond that no law could ever break.